おい、ぐるぐる。この戦いを制したらよ。ああ、見えてくるな。ルフィが海賊王になる姿。
Zoro and Sanji is the structure that lets Luffy's freedom actually function. Robin calling them the wings of the Pirate King in Wano isn't just a cool title. It's Oda quietly admitting that Luffy's dream doesn't get off the ground without these two holding up everything he can't do alone. They're not background muscle. They're the embodiment of how liberation survives in a brutal world. One side cutting a path forward, the other making sure no one breaks along the way. What makes their dynamic hit so hard is that they each carry a different half of what freedom really demands. Luffy is raw, pure, the engine of freedom, you can call it. But engines need direction and protection. That's where Zoro and Sanji come in, each filling a void the other can't touch. Luffy points to the horizon, Zoro clears the way, and Sanji makes sure everyone is still standing when they get there. Zoro's goal is brutally simple: become the strongest swordsman in the world. But that goal isn't about ego. It's a promise. Everything traces back to Kuina and the vow they made as kids. When she died, Zoro didn't just inherit her dream. He turned his entire life into a monument to that promise. The title of world's greatest swordsman becomes a gravestone, a prayer, and a destination all at once. He doesn't have a plan B. There is no version of Zoro that lives quietly if he fails. That's exactly why Luffy appeals to him. When Luffy first frees him at Shell's Town, Zoro isn't looking for a captain. He's just trying not to die before he can chase Mihawk again. Then Luffy does two crucial things. He respects Zoro's ambition outright. No mocking, no downplaying it. He declares without flinching that he'll become Pirate King. Zoro recognizes something important here. This isn't some kid screaming about glory. Luffy's dream is just as insane, just as absolute as his own. More than that, it's bigger. Pirate King is a title that sits above even Mihawk. If Zoro wants to reach the top with his own strength, it actually makes sense to bet on the man whose ambition naturally drags him into conflict with the world's strongest. As the story goes on, Zoro doesn't stay just because it's convenient for his goal. The way he behaves shows that at some point, my dream and Luffy's dream become linked. When he loses to Mihawk at Barity, he doesn't just vow never to lose again. He specifically frames future losses as a shame to his captain. Failure stops being a private burden and becomes a stain on Luffy's path. At Water 7, he's the one who draws the line. If the crew doesn't respect Luffy as captain, if Usopp can just waltz back with no apology, then this isn't a ship worth sailing on. It's about maintaining the kind of crew that can actually survive the journey to the top. In Thriller Bark, Zoro offering his life and dream to Kuma in place of Luffy is the clearest proof of how far this has gone. He's willing to die, and worse, to die before fulfilling his own promise. Just so Luffy's path doesn't end there, Zoro chooses to fight alongside Luffy because Luffy gives his ambition a context. Becoming the strongest swordsman in the world, in isolation, is just supremacy. Doing it as the right hand of the Pirate King turns that supremacy into a pillar of a larger era. He's the blade wielded by the freest man on the sea. On a character level, Zoro respects Luffy for three major things. Luffy never wavers about what he wants. Luffy treats Zoro's strength and pride seriously, never condescending to him. Luffy takes responsibility for his crew, even when that means taking insane risks. Zoro is fundamentally a warrior who needs a cause worthy of his steel. Luffy becomes that cause. Sailing alone might get Zoro strong, but sailing under Luffy lets his strength mean something. That's why Zoro feels no contradiction in swearing absolute loyalty while still pursuing his own goal. Reaching Mihawk and making Luffy Pirate King are aligned in his mind. Defending Luffy's dream is defending his own promise. In the end, Zoro is the sword pointed at the future Luffy is trying to rip open. He fights alongside Luffy because he believes in two things equally: that his own blade must reach the summit, and that Luffy is the one man whose back is worth guarding all the way there. Sanji's primary dream is the All Blue, a mythical sea where every ocean's fish gather, the ultimate paradise for a chef. But unlike Zoro's goal, Sanji's isn't just about personal achievement. It's an extension of his core value: feed everyone, let no one starve like he once did. The All Blue isn't just a rare ocean, it's an ideal world where a cook with Sanji's heart can do the most good. Two forces ultimately shaped Sanji. The first was Germa, which treated him as defective for having empathy. The second was Zeph, who starved on that rock so that Sanji could live and keep his dream. From that, Sanji builds his identity on three pillars: never let anyone go hungry, never hit a woman, and use his life as a wall between his loved ones and suffering. Sanji doesn't join Luffy because Luffy is strong or famous. He joins because Luffy offers something Sanji has never really had: freedom without conditions. On the Barity, Sanji stays out of obligation, guilt, and gratitude towards Zeph. Luffy interrupts that completely. He tells Sanji to come with him not as a tool, not as a soldier, but as his cook. a role that respects Sanji's dream and craft. Luffy relies on Sanji's compassion. There's also a practical harmony between their goals. Luffy is going to sail every sea to become Pirate King. The All Blue, if it exists, would be found by someone doing exactly that kind of journey. But Sanji's real reason for fighting alongside Luffy goes deeper than a simple, "this route might cross my dream." The turning point is how Luffy responds to Sanji's self-sacrifice. In Arlong Park, Baratie, and beyond, Sanji is always the one ready to offer himself up, but Whole Cake Island crystallizes it. When Sanji is dragged back into his blood family's world and forced into a political marriage, he doesn't look for rescue. He accepts the hell because his instinct is always the same: better me than them. He's ready to throw away his freedom, his place on the Sunny, and his own happiness if it means Zeph and the crew are safe. He even attacks Luffy and pushes him away, trying to make the break clean. Luffy's response is what locks Sanji to him forever, myself included. Luffy waits in the rain, starving, beaten, and declares that he cannot become Pirate King without Sanji. That line does something crucial. It reframes Sanji's self-image. Sanji has always seen himself as expendable, as the one who should pay the cost. Luffy refuses that completely. To Luffy, Sanji's existence isn't a bonus, it's non-negotiable. Sanji chooses to fight alongside Luffy because Luffy does three things nobody else ever has. He recognizes Sanji's kindness as strength, not weakness. He refuses to let Sanji treat himself as disposable. He gives Sanji a family that he chose, and that chose him back, over and over. Sanji continues to cook, fight, and suffer, not because he's stuck, but because he has finally found people worthy of that suffering. People who, crucially, will suffer for him in return. That mutuality is new to him. Even the moment in Wano where Sanji destroys the raid suit fits this. The suit promises a colder, more efficient strength, exactly what Germa tried to force on him. Sanji's rejection of it is more than a power choice. It's a statement. I will not trade my emotions, my empathy, or my version of manhood even if it would make me stronger. He'd rather be a slightly weaker shield that's true to itself than an unfeeling weapon. Sanji is the shield, because he chooses to stand between Luffy's reckless freedom and the human cost that freedom can incur. He fights by Luffy's side not only to chase the All Blue, but to make sure that the world Luffy is trying to reach, this era of liberation, is one where people are fed, protected, and valued. His dream and his compassion fuse into the same thing: a world where no kid has to starve on a rock again, and no misfit has to beg to be accepted. Zoro fights with Luffy to carve open the peak where their dreams sit. Sanji fights with Luffy to make sure, when they finally get there, they haven't lost their humanity along the way. Zoro and Sanji don't just bicker because Oda thought it'd be funny to have the swordsman and the cook beef forever, though it is hilarious. On the surface, yeah, it's petty as hell. Who killed the bigger dinosaur? Who's more useful? Who's more manly? It's a never-ending dick measuring contest. But underneath that noise, their rivalry is a pressure test. Every insult, every clash, is them sharpening each other. They're forcing the other to rise. They work as narrative foils because they're built on opposite energies. Zoro is brash, blunt, and grounded. He's a realist. He sees the world in terms of strength, resolve, and the brutal cost of failure. To him, if you're not strong enough, you die or you lose your dream. Sanji, in contrast, is a dreamer. He believes in ideals: chivalry, kindness, feeding even his enemies if they're hungry. Where Zoro stares reality in the face and refuses to flinch, Sanji stares at the impossible and says, "I'll make it work anyway." That tension between realism and idealism is what makes their dynamic so compelling. Zoro attacks, Sanji defends, but it goes deeper than battlefield roles. Zoro's whole existence is about cutting a path forward. He's the guy who will slice through anything in front of Luffy. He leads with authority when Luffy's gone, sets the tone, and reminds everyone, we don't bend, we don't break. Sanji, though, leads with heart and strategy. He's always thinking about angles, consequences, and people. He'll take the hit if it means the others are safe. He'll lie, hide, sacrifice his pride if the plan demands it. Zoro embodies the hard edge of reality. Sanji embodies the refusal to let that reality crush their humanity. What makes them pillars to each other is that each one covers what the other lacks. Zoro's realism keeps Sanji from floating too far into idealism, from sacrificing himself pointlessly. Sanji's dreamer nature keeps Zoro from becoming nothing but a weapon, from forgetting that strength is supposed to protect something soft, vulnerable, and precious. They don't just hold up Luffy, they hold each other up, whether they admit it or not. Their respect shows in how they move when it's serious. In Arlong Park, both of them instinctively protect Luffy while he's underwater. No orders, no coordination, just mutual understanding of their role. Safeguard the captain at all costs. In Little Garden, their rivalry mirrors Dory and Brogy's, two warriors who clash endlessly but are bound by unshakable respect. In Wano, they defeated King and Queen, Kaido's right and left hands, in parallel battles. That wings metaphor is important. A bird doesn't just have one dominant wing and a decorative one on the side. If one fails, the whole thing crashes. Zoro can't be Zoro in this crew without someone like Sanji balancing his harsh edge. Sanji can't be Sanji without someone like Zoro proving that cold resolve is sometimes necessary. They are structural to each other. Zoro carries the weight of brutal reality so Sanji can keep dreaming. Sanji keeps dreaming so Zoro's brutal reality has something worth bleeding for. Their rivalry hits so hard because they're close to equal in strength, even if their skill sets are different. They'll never admit it, but they treat each other as the benchmark. Every time Zoro cuts down a beast, Sanji pushes himself to do something just as insane. Every time Sanji pulls off an impossible save or strategy, Zoro refuses to be left behind. Dubbing them as co-protectors of Luffy's dream is an understatement. They're mirrors. Zoro recognizes that Sanji's emotional core is as essential as any blade. Sanji recognizes that Zoro's unbending will is as crucial as any kindness. It's brotherhood expressed through competition and trash talk. Within the crew, Zoro's love is quiet and unforgiving. He doesn't soothe people, he hardens them. When Chopper doubts himself, Zoro doesn't baby him. He tells him to stand up, to grow, because the sea won't pity him. When Robin's life is on the line, he has zero hesitation about cutting down anyone in their way. Even if it means standing against the world government, his realism means he always sees the worst-case scenario first, and he prepares for it. That's how he protects them, by making sure they are never unprepared for how ugly the world can get. Sanji's love is the opposite, loud, warm, and openly given. He feeds everyone, listens to them, comforts them. He's the emotional cushion the crew lands on when things get too heavy. Nami and Robin don't just rely on his strength, they rely on his gentleness. Chopper and Usopp rely on his encouragement. He's constantly making sure everyone feels seen, valued, and cared for. His dreamer side believes that even in a cruel world, joy, laughter, good food, and kindness still matter. He fights to preserve that softness. But when shit actually hits the fan, that rivalry evaporates. They move in sync without needing to talk. Zoro trusts Sanji to hold the line behind him. Sanji trusts Zoro to cut through whatever monster is in front of them. With Luffy as the chaotic heart at the center, Zoro and Sanji become the two stabilizing older brothers, one enforcing standards, the other providing comfort. The crew grows within that push and pull, challenged by Zoro, reassured by Sanji. They're the pillars that hold everything together when Luffy's off doing Luffy things. The recent depiction of Sun God Nika, wielding a sword and shield, has spawned theories that Zoro and Sanji literally represent these weapons. And honestly, it tracks perfectly. Zoro is the rawest depiction of the sword, the offensive force that cuts down tyranny, that clears the path for Luffy to spread freedom. His aggressive power, his willingness to fight the strongest enemies, his refusal to ever back down, that's the blade that carves through oppression. While on the other end, it's the shield, the defensive force that protects the weak, especially women, and ensures no one gets left behind. His compassion, his strategic mind, his refusal to let people suffer. While Luffy is freedom itself, chaotic, unstoppable, joyous. But freedom needs teeth and arms. Together they make liberation possible. All of the Straw Hats contribute, and I'll be probably making in-depth videos on each of them in the future. But let's be honest, Sanji and Zoro are the ones doing most of the heavy lifting. They're more than just crewmates. They're the structure that lets his idea of freedom actually stand. Zoro embodies the brutal, forward-cutting side of that ideal. The willingness to spill blood, endure hell, and never compromise once a path is chosen. Sanji embodies the protective human side, the refusal to let people starve, to abandon the vulnerable, or to buy strength at the cost of his own soul. One clears the way, the other makes sure there's still something worth protecting at the end of it. What makes them so powerful as a duo is that neither of them is complete alone without one another. Luffy is the dream that pulls them forward, but they're the ones who translate that dream into reality, through blood, food, scars, and stubborn conviction. When Luffy finally reaches the top and declares the world free, it won't just be the story of a boy who became Pirate King. It'll be the story of the sword and shield that chose to soar beside him and made that freedom possible. So guys, if you enjoyed the video, please consider dropping a like and subscribing to the channel. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and tell me what you'd like to see next.